Welcome to the Bowden Blitz ACC edition. I'm Joe Lisi, joined by former National Coach of the Year, Terry Bowden. Coach, it was a very good weekend in the conference. Upsets across the ACC. Thoughts about some of the teams that are actually hitting stride in week number 3?
Well, in the ACC, not just teams hitting stride like, Miami and maybe Georgia Tech, but teams that are struggling. Clemson, you got to wonder what is going on there in the ACC with their lack of being ready for the game against Troy, coming back to win, but creating nothing but doubt in the season so far.
Well, when you talk about Clemson, and that's a great place to start, they were 31.5-point home favorites against the Sun Belt opponent, Troy. We had talked about how dominant Clemson had been over the past decade, eclipsing a 70-5 record before they lost to LSU last weekend. And then when you look at it, they're 70-6 overall. They had lost 3 home games. Here comes a Sun Belt opponent. I just think the fan base, all the fans that were expecting a dominant home effort, they didn't get that. Cade Klubnik, that offense struggled. And more importantly, the offense is not running the football consistently. That could be a cause of concern entering this week against Georgia Tech.
Oh, and it will be, because Georgia Tech, you better run the football or they're going to have the ball running it against you, and that's been a problem for Clemson. And I'll just be honest with you, I've kind of lost my confidence in Clemson as a team that's a lock for the ACC championship. Didn't play well and got lost the first game to a good LSU team. At home, I thought they could pull that one out, but now against Troy, they come and they weren't ready to play, couldn't run the ball consistently, and they had to come from behind to win. It was a great come behind victory. But if it's creating doubt in me, and I had a good feeling about Clemson coming into the season, it's creating some doubt with the players and with the fans, and that's hard to overcome if you don't get it taken care of. So 2 mediocre games in a row, and at home this last game, both games, and I think we've got to watch and see how they're going to continue to play throughout the season, because it's got to get better.
Are you concerned about the play of Cade Klubnik? Antonio Williams went down in the loss to LSU. He's been the best wide receiver entering this season, and huge expectations. Without him in that lineup, the passing game has been a little bit inconsistent. But has Cade Klubnik, up through 2 weeks of the season, have you concerned to the point where you want to see a little bit more over the course of the next 4 or 5 weeks?
Yeah, I think he's got to pick it up. Even in the first game, I think Coach Sweeney said our best player played an average football game, and that's putting a lot of pressure on his quarterback, but basically saying he's got to play up to his reputation of his abilities, and that's very important if you're going to be the kind of team that they've got. And it's a conference where they're not necessarily going to be underdogs throughout the season, but they've got a lot of teams that can play a lot better than Troy on their schedule. So it starts with the quarterback. He has got to accept the responsibility of being a Heisman candidate, of being the leader of that football team. The head coach says that he is the guy. He is the guy that's got to perform. He's got to come through and do it. Going to have to play a lot better, and we're gonna have to find out about Clemson. I've kind of lost my belief that they are a lock for the ACC championship game.
They face off on the road against Georgia Tech. They're 3.5-point road favorites. We've seen some books have 4.5s and 5s out there in the market. We'll break that game down a little bit later in the show. The other game that lived up to the billing, Coach, it had a 63.5 total. Sawyer Robertson and Baylor strike the upset over Kevin Jennings and SMU. This was a back-and-forth affair. Sawyer Robertson prevails with another 400-yard performance. Baylor rebounds in a big way, getting the outright upset over the Mustangs.
They did, and we talked about this game a lot last week, and I just felt that Baylor would win this game outright. It would be a close game, but I felt they were too good to be 0-2, and they're too good of a quarterback in Sawyer Robertson not to have a great team. Now, SMU had a great 15-1 home record over the last 16 games. The quarterbacks played so well, and really they let that one get away. They gave up 2 touchdowns in the last 5.5 minutes and lost in double overtime. But in fact is, the underdog won. Baylor is a team that I think will contend for the Big 12 championship. And I'll say this about Baylor. They've got to slow people down a little more, but they're going to score some points.
Kevin Jennings had a fantastic performance,
Uh-huh.
over 240 yards, a couple of touchdown passes. They can run the football in the first half and built a first half lead against the Baylor Bears. Baylor trailed by 14 points with about 5 minutes left in the fourth quarter. Sawyer Robertson with a dynamic performance, and Baylor's wide receiver Josh Cameron, 151 receiving yards, 2 big play touchdowns. That was the difference in allowing Baylor to prevail on the road in Dallas. The other big matchup took place in Durham. Duke, a 2.5-point underdog to Brett Bielema and the Illini. This game was close for about a half, but in the second half, Illinois pulls away a dominating road effort. Brett Bielema and the Illini could be potentially for real in the Big Ten Conference.
Yeah, they're ranked 11th coming into this week 2 this past weekend, and they've got Luke Altmaier at quarterback, one of the better quarterbacks that a lot of people don't talk about on a team that's known as a power running team, and that's exactly what they did to Duke. They began to overpower them, but they also have a quarterback to get to mix the passing game in. I thought Duke came to play. They were aggressive. They played hard. They got after them. They made big plays, and they got ahead in the first half. But Illinois was what I thought they would be. The stronger team won, the team with a stronger running attack. And so it was a good game for Duke for about a half. But Illinois proved they're going to be a contender in that league. I don't know that they can win the Big Ten, but they're going to knock somebody off that thinks they're going to win.
Now, SMU and Duke both lost last week, but non-conference games. Right. For both of those teams, where can they maybe make adjustments to potentially challenge for an ACC championship?
Well, I think they were doing the right things. Duke has played good football. They came out and played well. I really love the quarterback they picked up from Tulane. They paid for a good one with their NIL money. So I think they will be in contention. The thing that those teams have to worry about being in the ACC, that they can't lose too many games to get in the playoffs. They did not lose a conference game. But when you're in the ACC, I'm afraid you lose 2 or 3 games, you're not going to make the playoffs. So those were big games in that concern. But when it comes down to their schedule and competing in the ACC, I've seen nothing that would suggest to me these teams can't win 9 and maybe even 10 games.
When you think about the eye test in the conference, and we talk about some of the teams, we talked about SMU, Duke, and Clemson, but right. Miami and Florida State, just from the eye test right here, right now, entering week 3, Coach, seem like the most complete teams offensively and defensively. The Hurricanes sit at a plus 260 price. All of a sudden, Florida State making a move at 7-1. Do you agree with that assessment, or is there someone else you're keeping your eye on?
Well, no, I think it could be premature for Florida State because people tend to get used to the Gus Malzahn offensive style. He's got a perfect quarterback for the dual threat quarterback and for the offense that he runs. But there'll be some teams that understand and slow his offensive down. But I really think they've made the biggest impression with that huge win over Alabama. And they didn't just go out there and go through the motions in their second game. They went out there and just went after it and won big. And so good start for FSU. They're playing like a team that can contend. They've got good athletes. They had pretty good athletes last year, but they're playing with confidence now. Starts with a quarterback, but that really rolls over to the way the defense plays, and everybody is very confident right now. You've got to stick FSU back up there because, again, schedule's not overbearing. It's not like the SEC where everybody's schedule is very, very – it's either hard or not as hard. In the ACC, you've got a little bit more rest in between teams, and I think FSU is going to be one that's going to have to be contended with in that conference championship.
Thomas Castellanos and the Seminoles up through 2 weeks have already lived up to the hype. We'll see what they can do the rest of the way. Another team that bounced back in a big way, Bill Belichick and the North Carolina Tar Heels, they get the road win in Charlotte. We'll talk about that next on the Bowden Blitz. Back on the Bowden Blitz, Joe Lisi and Coach Bowden recapping week number 2 in the ACC. Left off talking about the Miami Hurricanes and Florida State Seminoles. We mentioned Bill Belichick. He opened at a 19.5-point road favorite over Charlotte. After that loss to TCU, Coach, that line shrunk to 13.5. North Carolina responds with a gutty defensive road effort. They pick up the victory 20-3 over the 49ers. Maybe there's some optimism now in Chapel Hill, but they still have a long road to make it in the ACC.
I tell you, there's not any room for optimism. If you can't get optimistic after how bad it was last week, but I don't think this Charlotte is a real good indicator of improvement. They scored quick and then they fell asleep again. Did not dominate a Charlotte team. They needed to win real bad. It was so ugly the week before, but I don't this win was an indicator that the program is there. I think they've got 4 or 5 wins when you look at their schedule. I think they've got 4 or 5 wins, but I'm just not sure I've seen enough so far. I think the quarterback at best is a very average quarterback. I think at best, that 5 wins, maybe 6 would be the limit.
Well, when you look at Belichick, we know he's a defensive-minded head coach, right? So They give up 40-plus to TCU week 1. He had 6 months of preparation, and maybe it was a feeling-out process. They rushed for well over 200 yards, well over 5 yards per carry. They only give up 3 points to Charlotte. That has to be sort of a silver lining potentially. And from the coaching perspective, because then you now have 2 more winnable out-of-conference games before they square off at home against potentially top-ranked Clemson, is there anything that they could do or he can do from the coaching staff perspective over the next couple of weeks to build momentum before they face off against the Tigers?
He's been a head coach for so long, and I think your ability, and I don't know if it transfers from the pros to college, but you've got to motivate these young people. You've got to inspire them. You've got to build up their confidence. They're not grown men, all of them. They're young men, of course, but it's a little different than the NFL, and I think what he's got to do is build confidence, let them know that he believes in them, because you don't really think of Bill Belichick as a guy that just bubbles with enthusiasm and bubbles with excitement, but I think he needs to show a lot of positive feelings about this football team, because they're not going to get real good real quick. I think if anything, Belichick and his staff probably underestimated the difficult road they had to hoe. They had to build that program. But all they can do right now you got some games you can win, some non-conference games, build confidence, get your kids believing, make any adjustments where you had 70 new people. You got some guys playing that might not need to be playing. You got some guys on the bench that may need more time. Let's make those decisions so you're a better football team halfway through the season than you are right now.
They held Charlotte to 22 yards rushing on 28 carries, less than a yard per carry. So that's got to be a positive, right? But I want to get your thoughts about the quarterback position. Gio Lopez, the South Alabama transfer, had a very inconsistent game 1 against TCU. He gave way to Max Johnson, the former LSU, Texas A&M quarterback. He bounces back with a touchdown, no interceptions, 155 yards. Over the next couple of weeks, if Gio Lopez, let's say, doesn't develop and the offense isn't throwing for 250 or 275 per game, would you be out to maybe potentially make a quarterback change to Max Johnson that maybe gives you a better shot to win football games?
Yeah, I mean, if anything, that's something you do in a situation like North Carolina. New coach, new program, new future. Let's make sure we're building for the future. Let's don't get halfway down the road this year and say, you know what, we should have gone with another guy way back there. Make your decisions and go with it. You're going to be able to reevaluate these guys as you go, because I think the quarterback, to be honest with you, as what I've seen, not a bad quarterback, but I don't think he has great ability, very average in the ACC compared to the other quarterbacks that are there. So he may be the best they've got. I think they still thought he was going into game 2. He played better, but if it doesn't get better down the road, you got to make that move quickly, because too late doesn't help you at all this year.
Yeah, absolutely. Another team that has a potential quarterback is Boston College. They've been putting up points in back-to-back weeks. They go back and forth with the Michigan State Spartans in East Lansing. Jonathan Smith, Aiden Childs squeak out a 2-point win in triple overtime, Coach. this was a back and forth affair, and the Eagles potentially could be a team to be reckoned with from the offensive side of the football this year.
Yeah, the quarterback had good numbers. I think he's going to be a good quarterback. But for the second week in a row, they were just average in the running game. Not a good enough, strong enough running game. And, that's what you think of Boston College and the way they play football. They need to run the football as well as throw it. It needs to get better. That's a tough loss, but a game they could have won against Michigan State. I would just say to get themselves more balanced, to not have to depend on the quarterback to throw so much. Let's develop that running game, make sure it gets stronger as the season goes along.
I know you watched the game on Friday night with Louisville and Miller Moss and James Madison. That was a 14.5-point number. It goes right down to the wire on the line of 14. You saw Miller Moss. He comes and transfers in from USC. This defense didn't look the same, in my opinion, for Louisville that it did last year.
No.
That offense is still not running the football consistently. Could they make a run potentially over the next 4 or 5 weeks to maybe challenge the likes of Miami and Clemson?
Yeah, a couple things. I do think they're the top 4 or 5 teams in the ACC. I've got to see enough teams play other teams in their conference, but Louisville and SMU, Georgia Tech, they kind of hanging around that position 3, 4, and 5 in that conference. But they've just got to play a better football game than they played, and they did not play as well as I thought they would play. I know that Jeff Brom does a great job with quarterbacks. And they're going to develop that quarterback, and he's going to be good, but they have to play better defense, I think. James Madison is a team you don't want to play. I'm going to tell you something right now. They have beaten the last 3 ACC teams. I mean, 2 years ago, it was Virginia, 36-35. Last year, it was 70-50 against North Carolina. And now you're talking about one of the top 3 or 4 teams projected in the ACC. And they pretty much got after them the first half. They got after them. Then LSU had to come back to win the game. So, one, I think James Madison's a lot better team than a lot of these other group of 6 teams that people are playing. And 2, Louisville still got to continue to improve.
Another team to potentially keep an eye on, Dave Doran and NC State putting up numbers. They went back and forth with Virginia this past Saturday. When Coach and I return, we'll get into the big games, week number 3 in the ACC, right here on the Bowden Blitz. All right, back on the Bowden Blitz, taking a look at week number 3 in the ACC. Some great games across the top 25. We'll start in Atlanta. Clemson goes on the road to face off against Haynes King and the Georgia Tech Yellow Jackets. Georgia Tech is 2-0. They potentially could be on upset alert. I'm talking about the Clemson Tigers, coach. They're minus 3.5 on the road. Haven't played in Atlanta since 2020. Last time they played there, Trevor Lawrence and the Tigers won that matchup 73-7. They've won 9 straight in the series, coach. The last 4 by an average margin of victory of 31 points per game. But I got to be honest, do not like the way Clemson is playing from an offensive perspective.
And I like the way Georgia Tech's playing. I like the way Haynes King plays quarterback. I like the toughness of their football team, the way their head coach has got them believing in themselves. And this is an upset special to me. I really look at this game as one, if I'm going to pick me an upset, it's going to go with Georgia Tech. Because, I mean, Clemson knew they needed to play well last week. They didn't play well. They're going to know they need to play well this week. To be honest with you, I said this earlier in our last segment, Clemson's got some problems that I'm not sure you just magically fix. You've got to get better in a few areas. And Georgia Tech's on a roll right now. So if you're starting to pick an underdog, I really like this 3.5-point underdog Georgia Tech this game. And I think by the end of the week, I'm going to stay with it and go with Georgia Tech this week against Clemson.
Now, we have to monitor the week. Coach and I will be on a little bit later in the week. Haynes King was banged up last week. Brent Key came out this week and said he will be practicing
Right.
all week. But we know at the college level what that means. From the coaching perspective, if Brent Key comes out and says Haynes King will be practicing with the team, is he definite on Saturday afternoon?
Yeah, and he has to be healthy. They run him too much. He's too much of an important part. And if he were to come out there, and from everything I've read, they say he'll be ready. But the way he runs the football and the physicality required to play the position that he plays, the way he plays it, that is a big factor. So we probably have to wait a little bit longer just to make sure something does come out. Because I still think in a lot of ways there's a lot of gamesmanship with these coaches in college football about guys being hurt or not being hurt and not wanting to release information too soon.
And when you look at this Georgia Tech defense, coach, giving up 131 rushing yards per game, they're only giving up 184 passing yards to opposing offenses, 29% third down defense, one of the tops in FBS. And that's got to be a cause of concern for Cade Klubnik and Garrett Riley right now, because Clemson right now only averaging 75 rushing yards per game. They need to start fast. There's more pressure, to your point, on Clemson to respond in this matchup. If Georgia Tech jumps up early, could be lights out.
And that's what Georgia Tech has the ability to do. And really, that's what Clemson, if they don't come out sharp, looking good early, and they fall behind against Georgia Tech, that's not a team that you're necessarily going to come back against. Because, again, with their way they run the offense, you may not get back on the field quite as often. So it's going to be a monumental task for Clemson in this football game. And so, again, a lot for those reasons makes me think Georgia Tech is a team you got to keep your eye on in this football game.
Coach and I will be breaking down that game along with Miami and South Florida later in the week. Another under-the-radar game in the conference takes place in Lane Stadium. We saw Virginia Tech open as a 1.5-point home favorite to Vanderbilt last week. It got up to 2.5 right before kick. They had a double-digit first-half lead and surrendered that. They got blown out at home last week by the Commodores, 44-20. They're now laying 7.5 to ODU. I like ODU to potentially hand Virginia Tech their third loss of the season, Coach.
Yeah, I'm taking the points in ODU. I know a little bit about ODU. They came in Division I football a lot better than people thought. Nobody had heard of them. And, of course, I saw them play against people in the Sun Belt and watched how they played. This is a very good program. And I want to say they barely lost 27-14 to Indiana when they played Indiana. It was a tight ball game when they played. And they are a good football team. And Virginia Tech right now, 0-2, the confidence is beginning to leave this program, and there's some frustration. And I see that like you. I'm going to take ODU in the points. Whether they win it outright or not, I'm not sure. But I'm taking ODU because I really think Virginia Tech is struggling right now with confidence that they've lost being 0-2.
And Virginia Tech entered this year, Coach, with a 6.5 win total. They went toe-to-toe with South Carolina in game number 1, lost it by 11 points. That was a game last week that they had Vanderbilt basically dead to rights and couldn't pull it out. And then you saw the kids potentially sort of cave in the fourth quarter. Right. That is a cause of concern entering week number 3. For Coach Bowden, I'm Joe Lisi. We'll see you later in the week right here on the Bowden Blitz.